great honor for me to stand here and tell you my story as a Holocaust survivor. I must confess, however, that I consider the generation of my parents to be the real survivors. They lived the war years in full awareness and fear of the tragedy we faced, and it was they who had to take decisions which meant life or death. I was just a young child who saw it, lived it, and was lucky to survive. My parents' generation is no longer here, and it is now up to us to witness, to remember, and to report. Soon the last of us will also be gone, and the world will have to rely on written documents, photographs, and films in order to know about the Holocaust of the Jews and the 6 million who were murdered. The Holocaust is unique in history as a master plan to destroy an entire group of people. It was perpetrated by Germany, one of Europe's most civilized countries. Anti-Semitism is a very old phenomenon. Throughout history, Jews have often been scapegoats for problems in the countries where they lived for generations. For instance, Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492 and subject to the pogroms in late 19th century Russia. However, never before was there a master plan to exterminate all Jews. The Nazis named it the final solution. They executed it using the most modern technology of the time and nearly succeeded, as over 60% of Europe's Jews were killed. In addition to the Jews, the Nazis also targeted and murdered other groups who they considered not worthy of living. With the slogan that Europe should be Judenrein, meaning cleansed of Jews, the possibility for escape or resistance was extremely limited. The Nuremberg laws passed by the Nazi government in 1935 defined who was a Jew, and this even included baptized Christians with Jewish ancestry. And now to my own story. As the Consul General said, I was born in November 1936 in Budapest. My father, Willy Rottenberg, was a Hungarian Jew. My mother, Berta Paswe, was Swiss of Polish Jewish origin. Her parents owned a textile business in the Swiss city of St. Gallen, which was world famous for its embroidery. My grandparents opened a branch of their business in Budapest, where they also lived temporarily. My mother, as a young woman, used to accompany them there. She loved the lively city, which in the 30s was called Little Paris, with its metro and main boulevard that resembled the Champs-Élysées. Gifted in languages, my mother quickly learned Hungarian and worked as a private teacher in the home of a family of bankers who treated her like their own daughter. It is there that she met my father, an accountant in his family's textile business. They married in April 1935. Because of this marriage, Berta had to give up her citizenship, her Swiss citizenship, since any woman marrying a foreigner had to surrender her Swiss passport. By contrast, any foreign lady marrying a Swiss man immediately received a Swiss passport. This discriminatory law almost cost us our lives, as my mother was now a Hungarian citizen. My parents, Berta and Willy, lived the unspectacular but pleasant life of a Jewish middle-class couple in Budapest, surrounded by my father's large family and many friends. We spent our yearly holidays with my mother's family in Switzerland up to the summer of 1939, 2 weeks before the outbreak of World War II. My father ignored all the warnings, and although the Swiss family begged him to stay, he did not want to leave his parents or work in Hungary. He argued that nothing would happen to him as a decent Hungarian citizen. He, like so many others, could not imagine what his beloved home country had in store for him and for hundreds of thousands of other Jews. Out of 600,000 Hungarian Jews, over 400,000 were killed within a short time. On March 19, 1944, my father came home from work earlier than usual and said the fateful words, "They are here." I felt their heavy meaning. German troops occupied Hungary that day, and from then on, our lives changed forever. Up to then, I had a pleasant childhood. I was spoiled by my grandparents, uncles and aunts. I played with my friends in the park on the elegant Danube riverbank. In winter, we went skating, in summer hiking and swimming. As a first grader, I loved reading and envied other children who had siblings as playmates while I was an only child. Sometimes I was a bit ashamed that my mother spoke Hungarian with a foreign accent, but this was probably my only major childhood problem. At home, I loved listening to the Swiss songs she played me on the piano. With the arrival of the Germans and under the supervision of Adolf Eichmann, 107 severe laws were implemented, stripping Hungarian Jews of all their rights. Eichmann was responsible for the final solution, for the so-called Endlösung. His aim was to speed up the deportation of all Hungarian Jews to the death camps of Auschwitz. 17 years later, I worked as a translator at the historic Eichmann trial in 1961. Only then could I understand the scope of the atrocities when listening to survivor testimonies. As a first step, all Jews, including children such as me, had to wear the yellow star to differentiate us from all other Hungarians. Most Jews had already lost their jobs, and our school was closed. We were only permitted to leave our homes for 3 hours each day. It was forbidden to go to public parks, sit on benches, or use public transport, except in the last carriage of a tram. These were just a few of the restrictions. This was everyday life. Budapest's large Jewish population was transferred into the small area of the city center, where houses with Jewish residents were marked with large yellow stars on black backgrounds. This was to facilitate their deportation. 70,000 people were given just 24 hours to leave their homes, deprived of their property and rights. The building where we lived, opposite the Opera House, became such a starved house. Strangers came to live, or more accurately, camp in our apartment. One family opened the grand piano in our living room and cut off all the strings inside to use the space as a bed for their babies and small children. At that time, my mother was in her 4th month of pregnancy, and my father was sent by the Nazis to a labor camp where his unit repaired railway tracks destroyed by the Allies. This was the main route for the daily transport in which people were crammed together in freight or cattle wagons en route to Auschwitz. My father told us after the war that some desperate mothers tried to hand out their babies to the Jewish railroad workers. He and his companions feared that their own families might be in one of these many transports. Life was fear and chaos. We slept in our clothes so that when air raids sirens woke us at night, we were ready to rush down to the air raid shelter in a damp cellar. I was terrified by the exploding bombs and anti-aircraft guns. By day, we feared the noise of each lorry. If one stopped, uniformed Nazis would force people onto it and take them away. One would never hear of them again. The Jewish population was in panic. We had no escape. Some people tried to procure false papers or find a hiding place with non-Jewish friends. Families were split up and food was scarce. To leave the house was dangerous, as the Nazis could arrest you without any reason. One evening, one of my school friends stood on our doorstep crying. She said that uniformed men had entered her home, destroyed the furniture, taken away her parents and older brother, and left her alone. I don't know what has become of her. One day, a non-Jewish neighbor approached my parents, suggesting a deal. He would take me in so that at least I would be saved. Should my parents survive, he would return me to them. If not, he would look after me like his own child. My parents thanked him but declined. Their fate would also be mine. Today, as an adult with children and grandchildren of my own, I understand how hard this decision must have been. Some families decided to give their children to Christian neighbors or friends willing to take them. This too was a great risk, as any person who tried to help Jews was heavily punished, if not killed. We also heard of whole families who took poison to avoid deportation. While we applied for entry visas at the Swiss consulate in Budapest, my mother's family in Switzerland also made every effort to get us out of Hungary. Hundreds of desperate people queued at the consulate day and night as word got around that Consul Lutz gave out so-called Schutzpässe, a safety pass to protect people. The famous Swedish diplomat Raoul Wallenberg was doing the same at the Swedish embassy. At the Swiss consulate, a young diplomat, Dr. Harald Feller, was in charge of our file. Thanks to his skillful negotiations with a high-ranking German official, we obtained a transit visa to Switzerland through Nazi-occupied Austria. Feller, who in secret was also hiding Jews in his residence, was responsible for former Swiss citizens, including my mother and two other ladies who had the same fate, marrying Hungarian Jews. Life in Budapest became increasingly perilous with the Russian army approaching and the daily mass deportations to Auschwitz. Feller found a hiding place for us so we could leave immediately if and when he obtained our transit papers. He feared that we might be deported or arrested in the meantime. It was a hot August day in 1944 when we left our home for good. I recall my mother removing a yellow star from my dress, which she ironed carefully that no trace was left. She explained that I was not allowed to say that we were Jewish and that I must declare that my father was a soldier fighting on the front. I liked this sentence. I thought it was important, and I still know it in Hungarian. I also remember our last meal at home that day with my wonderful grandfather crying while he carried down our suitcases. My mother and I, with two formerly Swiss women we had never met before, but who of course became our friends, we moved into the hiding place that Fella arranged for us opposite the National Museum. One night, when we were sitting in the air raid shelter there, the building started to shake like in an earthquake. The museum had been bombed. A frightened lady asked me to pray with her to the Virgin Mary, while my mother, just as frightened, feared my ignorance of Catholic prayers would endanger us. Back in our room, I watched the high flames of the collapsing museum. My mother expected her baby any day. She was in panic that Fella might show up with our documents just when she was giving birth. As we had nothing prepared for the baby, my mother and I went out for the first time in many weeks, for the first time without a yellow star, to buy a few clothes. Walking the streets like a normal citizen was a matter of life and death for us. On August 15, my sister Vera was born in a Budapest hospital. My mother called a doctor who she found in the phone book. She was in agony, having to leave me behind. After giving birth, she was carried down to the hospital's air raid shelter with her newborn baby. During a heavy bombing attack, a brick fell on the little cot, but the baby was unharmed. Surviving was often due to small miracles. 6 long weeks passed under these circumstances, cut off from the outer world. I was endlessly bored with no friends to play with and just one book of fairy tales which I was reading over and over. Finally, on October 2, Fella brought us the long-awaited papers and the tickets to Switzerland. He personally accompanied us to the train station, handing us a cake for the long voyage. I still see him before my eyes, making this kind gesture. He made it clear that our fate in Austria was out of his hands. He also said that the Swiss consulate employee was on the same train, but we were not supposed to talk to him. For me, this train ride ironically felt like a great adventure. I was unaware of the grave danger we faced. The windows were painted black and the light bulbs were dark blue as protection from the air raids. The steam locomotives stopped from time to time in the middle of nowhere or changed direction. Passengers were mostly German soldiers, and I was not allowed to talk to them, as I could have betrayed us by one wrong word. My mother was in tears when the train stopped at the Hungarian town where my father was interned. He did not know we were on our way to Switzerland, nor that he had become the father of a new baby girl. We arrived late at night in Vienna, missing the connection to Switzerland. The next train was to leave early next morning. 2 Gestapo officers suddenly appeared, accompanied by 2 men in civilian clothes. They ordered us to get into their black Mercedes, to take us to the Hotel Metropole, which was, in fact, the Gestapo headquarters in Vienna. My mother thanked the man politely in a trembling voice and insisted that we preferred to sleep at the station. But the Gestapo officer argued, "My ladies, we are in wartime, and ladies with little children need our protection. You will come with us." Suddenly, one of the men in civilian clothes interrupted the conversation and said in Swiss German, "Stop making a fuss and just get into the car." We immediately understood that this was a Swiss diplomat traveling on the same train, and this too was arranged by Feller to help us. I remember that night as if it was yesterday, the car ride through dark Vienna, the arrival in the brightly lit Gestapo headquarters, SS officers with shining leather boots holding German shepherd dogs on leashes. A red flag with a black swastika was behind the reception desk. We were asked to leave our suitcases in the lobby and were ushered to an elegant suite. Chambermaids brought us milk for the baby and snacks for us. We received royal treatment, and I could not understand why my mother, pale with fear and exhaustion, paced back and forth all night. Today it is hard to believe that the Jewish woman and her children spent the night unharmed at the Gestapo headquarters, while in the same building, at the same time, prisoners were held and tortured. In the morning, we were taken to the train station, but our luggage had vanished. The next train took us further west, and we hoped we might finally reach Switzerland. But again the train stopped in a small Austrian town, a few miles from the Swiss border. Here too, so close to the promised land, we could have been caught and sent to the death camps. Our little group must have looked so pitiful and miserable that the station master brought us tea and let us sleep on long wooden tables. It is hard to describe the feeling of relief and gratitude when we finally crossed the border to the safe haven of Switzerland. Our papers were in order and no questions were asked. Again, a kind person, this time a Swiss railway clerk, gave my mother 2 francs to call my grandmother, who for months had no news from us. She could not believe that we were alive and in Switzerland. She had, of course, heard of the deportations and killings in Hungary and almost given up hope of ever seeing us again. In January of 1946, we learned that my father finally arrived at the Swiss border, but he was refused entry on the grounds that too many refugees had already been accepted by the country. His father, my beloved grandfather, died of starvation in the Jewish ghetto of Budapest, as had thousands of Jews. My Aunt Charlie was taken on the death march towards Vienna. People had to walk in the cold for miles until they collapsed and were shot. After a few weeks, my father was allowed to enter Switzerland for humanitarian reasons, on condition he leave the country with us within 3 weeks. It was irrelevant to the immigration authorities that my mother had been a Swiss citizen before her marriage, or that her brothers were serving in the Swiss army. We got legal help and finally obtained residency, but my father was refused a working permit, so my mother had to go to work. After several years, he finally was allowed to establish a business. We slowly integrated into society, and in 1960 became Swiss citizens. I can now look back at a full professional life as a literary agent. My younger sister, Vera, became a Swiss Supreme Court judge. I am married to the filmmaker Eva Koralnik, and we have a daughter, a son, and 4 grandchildren. And what happened to our rescuer, Dr. Harald Feller? He had been one of the youngest Swiss diplomats in Budapest when the Red Army entered. On February 12, 1945, Feller and another Swiss diplomat were taken to Moscow as hostages. They were initially declared missing by Switzerland, by the Swiss government, and a mass was held for them in the cathedral of the capital, Bern. However, a year later, both diplomats were returned in exchange for 2 Soviet prisoners. It took me almost a lifetime, until 1992, long after my parents had passed away, to confront my childhood and look for the man who saved us. One day, I was hit by an urge to know more. I tried to locate Feller, found his address, and wrote him a short letter asking if we could meet. I wanted to hear our story as told by him. He immediately responded and said he kept my mother's cable from 1944, confirming that we had arrived safely in Switzerland. We subsequently had many extraordinary encounters. This elegant, elderly gentleman stated early after his return to civil life was a well-known figure in Bern. He used to visit prisons and stage plays with the prisoners, and he was himself an actor. We saw him on scene. We became friends, alas, very late in his life, and I'm grateful that he told us our story from his perspective with the many details that are so precious to us. My sister and I arranged for Feller to be declared righteous among the nations at Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem. This is a special honorific used by the State of Israel to recognize non-Jews who risked their lives during the Holocaust to save Jews from extermination by the Nazis. On September 6, 1999, Dr. Harald Feller received the medal at a ceremony in Bern and said, I quote, I accept it on behalf of all those men and women who selflessly helped refugees and whose names will never be known. Harald Feller died in 2003 at the age of 90. The annual UN Holocaust Memorial Day honors the memory of the 6 million Jews and other victims of the Holocaust. This number is so often repeated that I fear it can sometimes lose its meaning. There were 6 million human beings like all of us here in this room. I am privileged to share my experiences with you tonight here in Hong Kong, thanks to Harald Feller, a non-Jewish man who saved our lives, and thanks to the bravery and fortitude of my mother and the miracle of luck. Thank you.